EU live from Brussels with the news and analysis to start your day. Coming up today, incoming Hungarian leader Peter Magyar has said that billions in frozen EU cash will flow to Hungary soon after what he described as a constructive and productive meeting with the European Commission chief. Magyar said he'd be back in Brussels by the end of May to conclude a deal. And ahead of a closely watched EU-China meeting next month, tensions are steadily rising. China has vowed countermeasures if the EU goes ahead with plans to shield its homegrown industries. We look closer at the points of tension. And after militia groups seized parts of Mali and killed the country's defense minister over the weekend, Russia has claimed that its paramilitary helped prevent a coup. We speak to the EU's special representative to the Sahel about what the uptick in violence means for the EU's strategic approach to the region. And in other news this morning, Ukraine has formally asked Israel to arrest a cargo ship carrying what Kyiv says is stolen Ukrainian grain. Meanwhile, Russia has said it will scale back its Victory Day parade next month, blaming what it describes as a threat from Ukraine. But first, to our top story this morning, Hungary's incoming leader Peter Magyar made his Brussels debut yesterday, meeting Commission President Ursula von der Leyen for talks on unlocking frozen EU funds. For more, we can go straight now to our Europe editor, Maria Tadeu. Good morning, Maria.
Good morning.
It was a big expectation ahead of this meeting yesterday, but what was actually achieved?
Well, there was a lot of expectation, but it was a short visit. It was practically in and out from Brussels. Peter Magyar went straight to meetings with the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and Antonio Costa. No questions from the media, just a photo op in a way that reflects the moment in time for Peter Magyar. He is not yet the Prime Minister of Hungary, and the fact that they're meeting at this stage is significant for two reasons, Marit. It speaks to the urgency of the moment. Of course, the goal now for Peter Magyar is to access the funding, the money that is blocked. A big part of it is the 10 billion euros connected to the recovery fund that was put forward after the pandemic. He either gets a deal before the end of August or this money will quite literally go to waste. And then, of course, there's a political momentum between the two sides. This is a moment in which both agree now, after very tumultuous, of course, years under Viktor Orban, that they want a reset, that they want better political relations between Brussels and Budapest. And this is now the moment to begin talks. We know there's been talks at a technical level. Now they have moved on into a political level between Peter Magyar and the head of the Commission. As I say, the money, 10 billion euros, is not insignificant for an economy the size of Hungary. And he also said he will be back. Then in terms of the meeting itself, he did put out a tweet after just speaking with von der Leyen in which he said, we had very highly constructive and productive meetings with the head of the European Commission. And in one sentence, EU funds will soon start, and this is the key, arriving in Hungary, enabling us to kickstart the Hungarian economy. So the focus very much on the money. And as I said, he's already said he will be back in Brussels on May 25th. Obviously, he will be Prime Minister by then.
So optimistic rhetoric, Maria, but a tight deadline.
Well, very much. And honestly, this sounds very optimistic when I look at this because the deadline is tight. If you look at this in practical levels, you are almost factoring 4 months of money that has been blocked now for years over very serious issues that are not easy to fix overnight. And they have to do with not just allegations of corruption, but also the idea of rule of law and the judiciary. This is also going to be politically sensitive for the two of them because Peter Magyar clearly needs the money. He clearly has the Hungarian economy in focus, but he also has to walk a very fine line. And that is not being seen as perceived as, certainly in Hungary, as a man who is simply saying yes to the Commission and as a man who's simply taken orders from the head of the Commission. And when it comes to the European institutions too, this is also delicate because they need to show that money is not political and merit. Money is always political, but they need to also show that there is merit behind this, that there are real changes that are going to happen in Hungary. And of course, there's a cautionary tale with Poland because if you go back in time, when Donald Tusk won the election, also promising a reset with the European Union, the institutions rushed to unlock money. But then, of course, now the Polish are really struggling to change fundamental issues like the judiciary because of the presidential veto. Magyar does not have that issue. He has a supermajority, but he does have this issue of the timing, the authority, the language around this. And of course, this is going to be tricky for the two of them to arrive to this point in August. But obviously, that is how a Brussels deal works. It needs to be seen as difficult for the deal to happen.
Okay, Maria, thank you so much for that analysis. Now, weeks before a closely watched EU-China meeting, tensions are threatening to boil over between both sides. China has publicly criticised Brussels multiple times in the past week, including over its plans to shield its homegrown EU industries. So, is there a road back to even-handed diplomacy or more fighting ahead? For more, we're joined in the studio this morning by our correspondent, Angela Skujins. Angela, great to see you again. Remind us, why are these tensions boiling up again this week?
Good morning, Marid. So, like so many of these international spats, it is mostly centred on trade. Beijing came out with a statement this week blasting the EU's push to supercharge industry and support the local manufacturing of products such as cars, solar panels, aluminium and cement. They stated, that spokesperson from the Chinese Commerce Ministry has stated that this push could potentially violate World Trade Organization principles and hurt foreign investment. It's important to point out that many see this push as a way to even out that trade deficit with 300 billion euros, the difference in 2024 with European manufacturers paying the price. I managed to speak to an MEP from the European Parliament, Sakis Arnautoglu, who sits on the delegation regarding EU-China relations. He pointed out that there is a difference in the dynamics between the duo when it comes to trade, but maybe finally the EU is speaking a language that China recognises.
For many years, we believed openness alone was enough, but today we know resilience matters too, because otherwise you cannot survive in this environment. And China has been very tough. We don't seek any confrontation, but I think Europe must stop being vulnerable. And some say we have been a little bit naive too.
An MEP speaking there to me about the difference between the European Union and China, the EU's big push to become more autonomous when it comes to supply chains and those products. It's also important to point out that Beijing is furious regarding an EU push to change the Cybersecurity Act, as well as by placing at least a dozen defence companies on a sanctions ban. But all eyes will be on an important EU-China conference expected to take place on May the 12th. The event is being billed as an opportunity for a frank discussion among delegates as well as politicians. So all eyes will be on this to see whether the conversation can continue or whether it will peter out.
Angela, we'll be keeping an eye on that conference, I'm sure, on May the 12th. Thank you so much for that. We're turning to Mali now because last weekend, armed groups, including separatist and jihadist militants, carried out coordinated attacks across the country, killing the defence minister. The wider Sahel region has been experiencing a period of profound instability, with European credibility in the region in steep decline, as our reporter Estelle Nilsson-Julian explains.
Europe is grappling with strategic security concerns on all fronts, from the Middle East to Russia's war against Ukraine. But there is another crisis that Europe cannot ignore: the ongoing situation in the Sahel, where a coup epidemic has been underway since 2020. Over the weekend, an alliance of al-Qaeda-linked jihadists and Tuareg separatists staged the largest coordinated attack on Mali in over a decade. These two groups may have different ideologies, but they share the same opponent: the military junta that has run Mali since 2020, backed by Russia. France has since urged any citizens currently in Mali to leave the country. But this isn't just about Mali. The country sits in the Sahel region, a belt that stretches across West and Central Africa, where coups and jihadist violence have been rising in recent years. Since 2022, France has been dismantling its military presence in the region, pushed out by a growing anti-Western sentiment and a shift of support in favour of Russia. Although Europe has been working to strengthen ties with Mauritania and coastal Western African countries, it has struggled to implement a unified strategy. The situation has major consequences for the bloc. Officials have long warned that Sahel terrorism is a threat to European security. The belt also sits on key migration routes, meaning instability could drive more migrants towards Europe. Europe is failing to claw back relevance while Russia and China are consolidating their foothold.
Well, yesterday I sat down with the EU's special representative to the Sahel, João Cravinho, and I started by asking him what the most recent uptick in violence in Mali could mean for the EU's strategy towards the region.
Well, firstly, it means very clearly that the situation is extremely unstable. It is a situation of very precarious stability, meaning that what happened on the weekend can happen again. So this is really a terrible situation, above all, for the Malian population. What it means is very simply that it has become clear that there is no military solution to the situation in the Sahel as a whole, including Burkina Faso and Niger.
This comes following years of instability, including successive military coups in many countries in the central Sahel. We also know that the EU has lost real clout and influence in the region. Do you see the possibility now for it to claw back some of this influence? And is it possible to do that while Moscow, but also Beijing, Tehran, has such a visible presence?
Well, firstly, I think it is absolutely correct and normal for us to acknowledge that we have no monopoly in the region. This is a region that must be respected for what it is, and it is perfectly legitimate for other countries to have partnerships with other parts of the world. However, having said that, I don't think any other part of the world has the same level of direct interest as Europe does. What is clear is that over the past few years, we have had a series of monologues between us rather than a dialogue. We have not been, and it's a mea culpa here, we have not been capable of listening and understanding properly as we should. We have not really been capable also of explaining what our interests are in the region. And by the same measure, I think there has been a failure in terms of dialogue on the other side. So the idea of deepening and making a lot and improving our dialogue is fundamental. That's a starting point. And we're on the road. We've been doing that over the last year and a half. And I think there's quite a lot of recognition. Our relations with those regimes now have bridges which did not exist some time ago.
Would you say that the incidents in Mali could have undermined maybe the reputation or the image of Russia as a security partner? And could that lead to maybe efforts to diversify security ties from Mali?
Well, firstly, I think, of course, the Malians are going to have to do some reassessment. It's theirs to do, and I can't tell them what to do. But I think that it's obvious, due to the tremendous security failures of the past week, that they need to do some reassessment. Secondly, it's very clear that there is no solution through military means alone. The Russians only offer military support. They offer nothing else.
Do you fear that the Sahel is being neglected, and what could be the cost of that for Europe?
Well, I think it is very evident that there is limited bandwidth from our political deciders. I have had an interesting experience as a special representative of the European Union. I've been visiting most European capitals and speaking with the ministers. All the ministers tell me the Sahel is geopolitically strategic. And yet, they don't have time. They don't have time because of everything else that is happening.
And the cost of that for Europe?
The cost of that is that the situation is getting worse. But what I do believe is that we are developing the instruments to be able to take advantage of opportunities when they arise. And I think the opportunities will arise when it becomes evident that Europe is still the best possible partner for those countries.
Moving on now, there will be no military hardware on show in Russia's Victory Day parade next month for the first time in almost 20 years, as Moscow claims it is under threat from Ukraine. In a phone call with US President Donald Trump yesterday, President Putin also said he would unilaterally declare a ceasefire in his war against Ukraine for the duration of Victory Day celebrations. We can cross over now to the European Parliament in Strasbourg and to our correspondent Vincenzo Genovese, who is there for us this week. And Vincenzo, on this issue of Russia, it also featured prominently in a debate on EU-Russia ties in the hemicycle last night.
Yes, Mared, indeed. Good morning. Good morning from Strasbourg. It was quite a heated debate yesterday evening, as the topic is highly controversial among MEPs and also fuels discussion across Europe. Currently, we know Russian teams are excluded from sports competitions and Russia remains banned from cultural events such as the Eurovision Song Contest, but not from, for example, Venice Biennale, the world's most renowned contemporary art exhibition. So the question is, should the EU talk to Russia through diplomacy or at least through sports and arts or not? Let's put it to Ville Niinisto, who is an MEP from the Greens HIFA group and chairs the European Parliament Russian delegation. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning.
Should we talk to Russia or not?
I think we have to be very clear that Russia uses all connections or conciliation from our side as a way to show that they would have international legitimacy for their war crimes in Ukraine and ongoing slaughter of Ukrainians. So Russia has committed thousands of war crimes, torture of prisoners, rape of Ukrainian women, and these are kind of like systematic. So we have to remember that as long as the war continues and Putin does not take responsibility for the war crimes and Russia does not stop invading Ukraine, there is nothing we can talk about with Russia, and we should not give them any legitimacy through sports or culture.
The war continues, as you said, but Vladimir Putin announced a ceasefire for the Victory Day. Do you believe him? Is a serious offer?
No, it's not. I mean, Putin also feels, Russia feels weaker now than they did a year ago. Ukraine has done a lot of drone attacks inside of Russia, so they start to feel threatened by those attacks. So this is also for them to try to create a day where they can show their strength, but then they want Ukrainians not to intervene.
But some Europeans will go there, like Slovak Prime Minister Fico. Is it the right choice?
I think it's a totally wrong choice. We don't want to show any support for the current Russian regime in their kind of like also reimagining the past. Russia uses the Victory Day as a way of strengthening a very nationalistic future for Russia where human rights are not supported.
And meantime, there is also a standoff between Ukraine and Israel for what Kyiv says is stolen grains from occupied territories. What the EU can do on that?
I think you have to be very clear that all the support that we have for Ukraine and all the conditions and sanctions on Russia and action against Russians using Ukrainian resources elsewhere have to apply to all countries. So we have to be strict on Israel as well, and Israel has to pay if they do wrong on here.
Very clear. Thank you very much, Ville Niinisto. It's last day of plenary session in Strasbourg, and we will follow it as usual on Euronews. Mared.
Vincenzo there in Strasbourg, thank you so much for that. And that's it from us for today and for this week. We'll be back on Monday next week at the same time and the same place with the same news and analysis to start your day. In the meanwhile, you can keep up to date with more of our reporting on Euronews and Euronews.com. You can also get in touch with us. Email us at europetoday@euronews.com with your questions, feedback and tips. And we'll see you again on Monday next week.